Yeah, my name is Patrick. Just a little bit about me. I started selling on Amazon a little over a year ago as part of the Seller Labs 25K challenge. Seller Labs essentially gave me a $25,000 loan to start an Amazon business. I had never sold anything on Amazon prior. I had no idea about the process. So in the past 12 months, I've been able to grow this Amazon business from nothing to where I'm generating, just about $30,000 in sales per month, and that translates into about $8,400 in profit per month. So if you were to project those monthly profits out over 12 months, it would equate to about $100,000 a year salary. So I realize I'm not a huge Amazon seller, but I do have a full-time career besides selling on Amazon, and I do have a family. So finding time to sell on Amazon is, I don't have much. I pretty much do this on some nights and on the weekends. So because my time is limited, I've really had to rely on numerous vendors to really help me grow my Amazon business. And one of those vendors includes Shapiro, and they've helped me with one of the things I think is the most expensive, time-consuming, and honestly like scary things, which is to sell on Amazon, and that's logistics. So with that, I'll pass it on to Shapiro.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Hello, this is Nicola Mullaney. I'm the FBA manager here at Shapiro. Shapiro is a third-generation family business that has been serving the logistics community for over 100 years. We place a strong emphasis on compliance and technological solutions, and we have a stronger stance on customer service. We provide top-tier logistics solutions with a personalized approach. We love to get to know our clients and find ways to help them optimize their businesses. We've been working alongside Amazon for over 7 years, both with Amazon-owned goods and the Fulfillment by Amazon program. Shapiro currently provides customs clearance and freight forwarding services for FBA sellers in the US, Canada, the EU, and Japan. We offer a hands-on and informative approach to first-time importers to help ease the learning curve. As you're about to find out, there's a lot to be aware of, and we're here to help you navigate through the wonderful world of importing. The purpose of this session is to help you streamline and optimize your supply chain. We're going to focus on the aspects of importing that industry newbies are tending to overlook. We'll start at the beginning with Patrick providing some insight on choosing a supplier. Most of this content is geared towards sourcing from China, but rest assured that we can provide services from almost all other countries. From there, we'll work our way along the supply chain and end at Amazon's door. We'll have a brief question and answer session. So to kick us off, Patrick is going to share his experience with sourcing overseas.
Yeah, so when I first started selling on Amazon, I honestly did not really have the courage to import from China. So to learn the process, I just sourced products from manufacturers around my house out in California, and just to was just reselling product to learn the process of sending stuff into Amazon and selling using FBA. And so I was able to kind of learn the process without risking much money. But my Amazon business really started taking off when I did finally get the courage and I started importing products from China. So basically my process was I started with generating product ideas, doing product research on Amazon, and then once I had my product in mind, I used the website Alibaba.com to find suppliers. So my most common strategy, just FYI, when looking for products that I can sell, is I try to source a product that doesn't have like a dominant brand that people think of when they're buying that product. And I typically like to choose products that have a fairly straightforward functionality, and if possible, kind of the people selling that product on Amazon right now kind of have a low review count. So this is a strategy I used to source my first product from China, which was a soap mold. So fairly boring product that has a straightforward functionality, and there's no dominant brand. Like there's no, hey, what's the brand of soap molds that everyone buys? I can't think of one. So I felt that's something I could compete with. So I used Alibaba and got in touch with multiple suppliers. So before deciding to import anything, I first ordered samples. This is a fairly straightforward process that you do with suppliers out in China. They literally like overnight samples to you so you can check out the product and test it in your own home. And then, using PayPal, I was able to order the samples, and I was also able to use PayPal to order my first production run And I was really nervous when I bought my first order, just because I'd only exchanged emails with these factories. I had no idea if they would deliver. So it was honestly a little scary that I would lose all my money. So whenever I start working actually with a new supplier, I'm typically very nervous about that relationship. So my simple strategy with importing from China and kind of building that trust with my supplier is, first I ask them to, I order a small amount, and I typically have it shipped by air into Amazon FBA to kind of prove out that this factory really does know how to import into the US and into Amazon FBA, and they kind of can walk through the process. And once I'm comfortable with that, I will proceed with ordering a large quantity and ship it by boat. And kind of my experience has been that some Chinese factories really know what they're doing when sending stuff to Amazon FBA, and they don't need any coaching. And then I've also worked with factories that have never done it, and they really needed me to kind of hold their hand and kind of teach them, what to do and how to prep product to get it into Amazon.
Thanks, Patrick. So from an importing perspective, there are certainly going to be a few things to be aware of when you're sourcing a product and a supplier. So first, you're going to want to make sure the product that you're interested in is allowed into the U.S. or any country that you're sending goods to. Furthermore, you're going to want to know which government agencies may regulate your product. U.S. Customs are not the only ones interested in your imports. There's the Food and Drug Administration, the United States Department of Agriculture, Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Communications Commission, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife Services, just to name a few. You certainly don't want to get too far along the process before realizing that you're going to need a special permit, or worse, that the product is banned. As an example, we've recently seen sellers trying to re-export items such as first aid kits because they were not able to provide the medical device registration the FDA requires. You should also be cognizant of intellectual property rights, as those certainly come into play when importing, and U.S. Customs have recently taken an initiative to target violators more heavily. Any branded or trademarked products will require permission from the trademark holder if you wish to distribute it in another country. So you don't want to have to quickly learn how to export all those Nike shoes that you just spent so long trying to import. Once you've chosen a product and a supplier, you'll want to make sure that you understand which terms you'll be paying your supplier under. Incoterms, or terms of sale, play an important role in shipping, as they determine who is financially responsible for the goods at each step of the journey. Shapiro has a great graphic that makes this really easy to understand, and it's similar to the one that you're seeing on your screen now. I'll have more on Incoterms in just a little while, as you'll want to know what the price you're paying your supplier includes. This is really useful when you are pricing out transportation, which leads me to our next segment on choosing the right mode of transport for your needs. So if you're new to FBA, most likely you'll want to test the market on your product prior to investing in shipping larger volumes. In most cases, using a small parcel courier such as DHL or UPS would be your best option. Shapiro can help you decide if you need a broker or a freight forwarder, or if a courier is going to be a better option. In general, if you're shipping less than 150 kilograms of goods and the commercial value is less than $2,500, a courier can handle this for you, no problem. However, if you've got high-value goods or they're subject to regulations by another government agency like the ones I mentioned before, the courier may require a broker like Shapiro to get involved in the clearance portion of things while they handle the delivery for you. That's really no problem either, as we do provide flexible logistics solutions that are built to fit a variety of FBA seller needs. If you're looking to ship pallets or even a full container, we've got you covered there too. But before you can even start to price out shipping, you'll need to head to Seller Central to find out where Amazon wants you to send the goods. There's a high likelihood that they will want you to split the cargo up across several fulfillment centers, and sometimes that alone makes using the courier more economic. When choosing a mode of transport, the two main factors to consider are volume and speed. How much freight do you want to send, and how quickly do you want it to get there? In general, courier shipments are going to be the cheapest and fastest method, but only up to a certain size. After that, your options are air freight or ocean freight. With ocean freight, you can choose less than container load, also known as LCL, or full container load, which is also known as FCL. With less than container load freight, your goods will travel along with other people's cargo, which is great because you can share the cost of the container. However, this mode does put you at more risk for customs exams, which I'm going to get into in a little bit later. If you're able to get volume discounts from your supplier and Amazon isn't limiting your inventory capacity, shipping a full container may be a way for you to decrease your cost per unit. Full containers come in several sizes, but the most popular are 20-foot and 40-foot boxes. In general, you'll need a volume of at least 20 cubic meters to make shipping a full container worthwhile. Once you know where the goods have to go and have a rough idea of which method you'd like to ship by, then it's time to get a freight quote. Patrick, can you share with us how you optimize your inventory by shipping using different modes?
Yeah, so I'll kind of walk you through the process I use for launching a product and kind of when I use a courier versus shipping by boat. So typically when I have a product that I decide, hey, I want to launch this on Amazon, I'll use a courier, get it into Amazon FBA, and then I'll use, snagshout.com to get that product to start selling. So get a few product reviews and basically get my product ranking organically in Amazon search to kind of prove out like, hey, this product will sell really well on Amazon. So I might break even or even lose money during that process because shipping by courier is more expensive per unit than shipping by boat. But I'm basically risk adverse to spending a whole bunch of money and importing thousands of units that I can't move on Amazon. So once I kind of learn that, hey, this product can really do well on Amazon, that's when I decide, hey, move away from the courier, and I work with Shapiro to say, hey, I want to bring over a large volume of product to where it's much more cost effective to do that by boat. Now, like I said, I've never actually ordered enough product to do an entire container load, but one way I have optimized my shipping is sometimes I'll have multiple factories in the same city, even though they might be different products. So it might be like a soap mold and an apple slicer, but as long as they're in the same city, they can actually ship on the same container, and that does save quite a bit of money. But really, one thing I found helpful, since I'm not an expert in logistics and I have to do 100 other things when selling on Amazon, is that I really do like to outsource my logistics and basically just tell Shapiro, you just fill out these forms and Shapiro can take it from there and they can optimize your shipping for you as long as you qualify, as long as your factories can kind of send all your product to the same port. They can make sure that you're getting the best deal possible if you can ship as much product on a single container as you can.
Okay, so in terms of quoting and pricing, now that you've heard all the ways to ship, we need to talk about that. Shapiro has a freight pricing team that's dedicated to Amazon shipments, and as we know the ins and outs of Amazon shipping, we're happy to provide you with a few different quotes should you want to compare air versus ocean, or maybe speedy versus flow, or perhaps you'd even like to analyze the cost-benefit of utilizing Amazon's inventory placement program. In this program, for a fee, you can avoid Amazon splitting your cargo into 2, 3, or even more destinations, which may provide cost savings on the logistics side of things. Keep in mind, though, Amazon may still transship your goods to multiple fulfillment centers before making them readily available in the marketplace. So in order to provide an accurate quote, we'll need some specifics on your cargo. As Patrick mentioned, we have a simple PDF form that you'll complete that will provide us with all of the details that we'll need to get you a customized quote. Unfortunately, flat rate estimates are not a good idea when it comes to freight forwarding, so details matter. If you're planning to use a courier, pricing that type of transport is much simpler. We'll need to know where we are collecting the goods, and that will depend a lot on your terms of sale, or Incoterms. For example, if you're buying on FOB terms, that's free on board, then your supplier is handling taking the goods to the nearest port and clearing export customs for you. If your terms are ex-works, the supplier relinquishes responsibility once the goods are packed, and it will be up to you to get it picked up and exported. Shapiro has agents in just about every country that we partner with to handle this portion of the journey. We'll need to know the number of cartons you wish to send, as well as their weight and dimensions. Amazon has very specific receiving requirements, and Shapiro is happy to rework your cargo to configure it on the correct pallets to ensure proper delivery. In our experience, most overseas suppliers are unable or unwilling to follow Amazon's instructions. In order to provide pricing for this service, we have to know exactly what we're dealing with. So you may be thinking now, sure, I understand that you need a lot of information, but how soon can you deliver my goods to Amazon? In order to determine when your goods will be available for your customers, you'll need to consider a few different factors. While we can provide you with port-to-port transit times, there are a few elements of the import process that can cause delays. You'll need to consider that customs and other government agencies may hold your cargo for document review or even physical examination. This may cost you a few days as well as a few dollars, depending on the type of exam performed. As a new importer, it would be wise to cushion a few days into your lead time to allow for an exam. More on that in a little while. Another factor outside of your control is the delivery date. Amazon designates the appointment, and there's really no way to change that. It's advisable that if you have urgent freight that you let your forwarder know as soon as possible. Our pricing team can offer rates for expedited services in most areas. We'll touch on the specifics of the delivery process a little bit later. Another key factor will be the cargo ready date, and that will depend entirely on your supplier. Each quote we provide will indicate departure frequencies from the mode of transport that you chose. For most ocean freight, there's going to be 1 or 2 weekly sailings. Your cargo must be ready several days prior to the sailing date in order to make the vessel. So when you're planning your lead times, please consider that as well. The earlier you let us know about delivery deadlines, the better we can help you make them. And speaking of deadlines, it's important to be aware that most ocean freight quotes are only valid for 30 days. Rates are always fluctuating, so if your cargo is not ready to go by the time the quote is expired, we'll need to update the rates. Depending on the time of year, you could see some savings, but if it's peak season, you could see increased cost. Air freight rates are more volatile, so these quotes are valid for even less time. Also understand that if we've quoted delivery, those rates may expire by the time the shipment is actually ready to go to Amazon, and we can't always control that. The trucking market is becoming more and more unpredictable, and while we do everything in our power to stabilize rates, you as the importer need to understand this premise and plan for it. We're here to help you do just that. Patrick, can you describe the quoting process that you experienced?
Once again, I just kind of want to compliment Shapiro on this because they've made the quoting process really easy. Essentially, after submitting all kind of my details about my shipment that I get out of Amazon Seller Central, I get an email back fairly quickly in a day or 2 days with a quote, and I either approve it or reject it. And I basically can take that quote and compare it to, if I were going to air freight it rather than ship by boat, is it cheaper? Typically, obviously, if you're shipping a lot, shipping by boat is cheaper. But they basically, for me, I don't want to worry about logistics. So for me, just giving my kind of information over to Shapiro, getting the quote back in 48 hours, it's been really easy and really helpful to deciding what the best choice is for my business.
Great. All right, so now that we've got logistics covered, it's time to get ready for customs clearance and the fun of all that paperwork. Whether you're a U.S. resident or not, Amazon is not going to act as the importer of record for FBA shipments, which leaves you, the FBA seller, fully responsible for complying with U.S. Customs and other government agencies' regulations. Non-residents can certainly act as the importer for shipments into the U.S. Importing should be looked at as a privilege and not a right, and although it can be tedious at times, all importers must be willing and able to provide any information that customs or government agencies require. In order to act as the importer of record, the first thing you'll need to do is to purchase a U.S. Customs bond. The bond, at its core, is essentially U.S. Customs' way of ensuring that they receive payments for duties and taxes on all imports. Shapiro offers an annual or continuous bond, which will allow you to import for 12 months. We discourage the use of one-time or single-entry bonds, as they are generally not cost-effective and dramatically slow down the clearance process. Bonds are required for all sea freight shipments, even if the value is under $2,500. If you ship with a courier, in most cases a bond is not required. However, there are exceptions, so we do suggest checking with us before you ship anything. Along with the bond, you'll need to provide power of attorney, which enables us to perform customs business on your behalf. We also have terms and conditions of service agreements that we ask you to sign, and we have an optional credit application should you choose to apply. Please be aware that for any importers without credit, all of these transportation, duties, and tax costs will be due up front. Most of this paperwork is only completed once, so don't worry about doing it multiple times. So after that, after the initial onboarding paperwork is completed, it's time to look at what the commercial documents that pertain to your specific shipment will look like. When you import to the U.S., you must declare the true commercial value of the goods you are intending to sell. Customs are very good at figuring out when merchandise is declared with too low a value, so please ensure your supplier is invoicing you for the actual cost of goods sold. Customs is not interested in your retail price. As the importer, you are held responsible for the shipment, so any problems with clearance are going to be under your accountability. Not the suppliers, not the forwarder, and not even the broker. So it's really important to trust the partners that you're working with throughout the supply chain. The commercial invoice and packing list have several requirements, and Shapiro has a great blog post on our website on how to create the perfect set of documents for your shipment. It's best to be as transparent as possible, though, because through the glory of technology, customs are now able to see your actual invoice rather than just data as input by a broker. Ensuring that you have clear descriptions of your goods and even photos is one way to minimize the risk of a customs exam. Exams are generally the result of a random inspection or when customs isn't quite clear on something on your paperwork. Some of the data elements required on commercial documents are the country of origin, the terms of sale or Incoterms, your actual manufacturer's name and address, the gross and net weights, and the currency used on the invoice. Don't be surprised if we ask you a lot of questions. We're just trying to make sure that everything is entered accurately and in compliance with regulations. We promise we're not trying to create more work for you. So just how much are these customs duties and taxes going to run you? Well, that's really going to depend mainly on your commodity, but also on a few other factors, including the country of origin. Once where your goods are actually made and not just shipped from will determine if they're eligible for any free trade agreements or subject to any trade regulations like anti-dumping duties. Anti-dumping duties are high duties placed on foreign goods that have been priced below fair market value. You certainly want to be aware of these before committing to that product. So we encourage you to research duty rates with your broker prior to placing an order so that you can work those costs into your bottom line. Duty rates can be complex, and you want a licensed broker classifying your products for you, not a random website. Many articles have low or zero duty, but some, including textiles, can run as high as 20 to 30%. Again, quite a lot of details may be required in order to provide the correct duty rate. So now that I've been mentioning customs exams throughout this session, as they are an unfortunate reality when it comes to importing, you may first ask yourself, why would my freight be flagged for an exam? And why me and not that guy over there? To be honest, customs doesn't really disclose the examination information to the trade community due to national security risk. What we do know is that elements such as the shipper, importer, tariff number, and country of origin are all taken under analytical consideration. Although some examinations are completely random, there is a track record that follows you and your supply chain. If you're a first-time importer, customs will likely examine your first few shipments in order to establish credibility. If you're a repeat offender of marking or labeling issues, for example, be aware that you will now be under customs microscope. There's several types of exams. There's X-ray exams, which are the least invasive and generally take place within 2 to 3 days of cargo arrival. Then you have your tailgate exams, where customs will open the container and take a look, but they won't open any of your boxes. This can take a little bit longer. Intensive exams are the most invasive, as customs will go through and open the boxes and look directly at merchandise. Exam times vary from port to port and also depend on how busy the customs staff are. So unfortunately, there's no standard, so we recommend building in a cushion of at least a few days into your plans and then being diligent with your customs requirements and hoping for the best. If you're shipping with Shapiro, we'll keep you updated every step of the way. Remember, the main reason for exams is protection, so while it can be frustrating and costly, it is all for good reason. We have a great blog that goes into even more detail about exams on our website. Speaking of the costs, I bet you're wondering what these exams are going to run you. Well, it varies. Again, it depends on the port, the type of exam, and the amount of freight. Simple exams can cost as little as $50, whereas intensive exams can be in the thousands for a full container. The other cost to be aware of is storage. You would think that the ports and the carriers would be understanding when it comes to customs holding your freight, but you'd be wrong. There are some cases where you will be charged demurrage, better known as storage, even though you have no control over the fact that your cargo is unable to be picked up from the pier. It's unfair, but it's a fact, and that's why we want to prepare importers for this unfortunate reality. As importers, you are responsible for the costs associated with an exam, and Customs does provide a regulation spelling this all out. It's the Code of Federal Regulations 19, and it states that U.S. Customs and Border Patrol has the right to examine any shipment imported into the U.S., and it is important to know that the importer must bear the cost of all such cargo exams. The importer shall also bear any expense involved in preparing the merchandise for the exam and in the closing of packages. Patrick was fortunate enough not to undergo a cargo exam on his shipments with us, but not everyone will be so lucky. So with all this going on, I'm sure you'd like to hear that there's an easy and free way to keep updated on all of your shipments, and you're in luck. We offer a cargo tool called Shapiro 360, which will give you 24/7 access to the real-time status of your shipments. You can even contact your team here directly from the site if you have questions, and you can run a lot of helpful reports on your cargo trends. Maybe you're interested in how many times you got flagged for a customs exam in a certain period. We can provide that. Or maybe you want to calculate your landed costs. We can help with that too. We offer this tool to all of our clients as we've realized that sometimes you'll want some answers outside of normal business hours. The site is very user-friendly, but we do offer live demos to help you get started too. Patrick, do you have any comments on customs exams or using Shapiro 360?
Yeah, I mean, Shapiro 360 is kind of exactly what you would expect. You can log in and see status updates. I'm not ordering a bunch of containers every month, so there's like a bunch of features I don't use, but I know I can kind of grow into that functionality if I ever start shipping quite a bit more product over from China. And yeah, like you said, I've been lucky not to have a customs exam, but I realize that that's not always going to be the case.
Very true. Okay, so here we are. Your goods have traveled halfway around the world, they've made it through customs, and now they just have to make it to Amazon's door. It's wise to understand how these deliveries work, as that will allow you to identify the events that may cause delays. Once the freight arrives, it'll clear customs, and as long as there's no delay on the release, we'll send the carrier in to pick the freight up right away. If you're shipping with us, we'll have set everything up for quick release, but if you're using another forwarder, make sure that they've taken care of all of their responsibilities so that you can get your freight collected as soon as possible. More on this in a minute. Keep in mind that during peak delivery times like the holidays, sometimes Amazon's appointments are given as far as 2 weeks out. It's not ideal, but it's understandable considering how much freight they're dealing with during those surges. It's imperative that you plan your holiday shipping with this in mind, as well as Amazon's holiday deadlines, which are generally 3 weeks prior to the actual holiday. For example, last year, December 4th was the deadline for Christmas. If you're shipping LCL or FCL ocean freight and not small parcel with a courier, please account for the time needed to rework your freight onto the proper Amazon pallets once the goods clear customs. Our warehouse partners work as quickly as possible, but it's wise to have a good understanding of what needs to happen before your freight is Amazon ready. Amazon requires most freight to be delivered on 48 by 40-inch pallets. There's a weight limit of 1,500 pounds, and if you have multiple shipment IDs, these cannot be commingled on the same pallet. For the full scope of Amazon requirements, please contact us directly or check Seller Central. Unless you're shipping a full truckload or you've elected for expedited trucking, your shipments will travel as LTL, less than truckload. Just like LCL ocean freight, your goods will be consolidated inside a 53-foot truck with other people's cargo. So what does that mean for you? Well, if your cargo is not the first stop on the delivery route, there's a chance that delays at other stops may cause the driver to miss the Amazon appointment. Amazon warehouses all operate under the same strict set of rules. However, ultimately it is up to the manager on site to make the final decision in terms of accepting or rejecting deliveries. We've seen Amazon accept late deliveries if we gave them notice. We've also seen them reject it even just for being a few minutes late. While we respect their process, it is something for importers to be aware of, as something as benign as a flat tire on a truck could ultimately affect your product's availability. We need sellers to understand that these things happen, and know that when they do, we'll work with our carriers to correct the situation as soon as possible. I'll be discussing a little bit more about what can go wrong in just a minute. However, now I'd like to touch on deliveries that do not go directly to Amazon's door. While most sellers are sending their cargo directly to Amazon, there are some situations where you'll be sending your goods elsewhere. Maybe you want to follow Patrick's lead and ship in somewhat bulk, but Amazon has limited your inventory, so the goods have to be stored elsewhere. Maybe you want to send your goods to an inspection center prior to shipping to Amazon. In these cases, we'll need you to provide full receiving instructions for your ultimate destination. While we're well versed in Amazon's requirements, it's up to you to let us know how other warehouses need their deliveries handled. If you're not based in the U.S., we'll need the tax ID of the receiving location for customs clearance purposes. We'll also be asking you whether or not they have a loading dock, if a pallet jack is required, do they require an appointment, is the delivery considered residential, because if so, there's usually additional fees for these services. The details matter here, as we want your non-Amazon shipments to go just as smoothly as the Amazon ones. So, Murphy's Law, what can go wrong? Clearly, there are a lot of contingencies when it comes to importing. We certainly don't want to discourage anyone from importing, but we find it's a much smoother process when new importers are educated and aware of how the process works, as it gives them a chance to put together a well-thought-out plan, leaving much less room for disappointment and frustration. I'd like to take a moment to review some circumstances that we've seen new importers face that could have been less challenging had they known ahead of time what to expect. To circle back to the relationship with your supplier, it's important to lock down the terms of sale that you're working under, and also the cargo-ready date. Remember, freight quotes are only valid for so long, so you'll want to be in sync with your supplier on this. Nothing is as frustrating as delays that happen before your cargo even exports. You'll also want to understand how the exchange of ownership works. The bill of lading is a document that your supplier will release to you to transfer the ownership of the goods after they've received your payment. They can do this in two ways. The old school way, which means they'll issue you an original carbon paper document that you then need to endorse and surrender to the ocean carrier before they'll release the cargo for pickup. Alternatively, they can issue an electronic release so everything is handled digitally and no originals are required. We highly recommend using telex or electronic releases, as it's far less of a headache for you. Original bills of lading are difficult and costly to replace, so save yourself the hassle and elect for a telex release. Be sure to know which method you're going to use and give your broker this information as well. We've already covered a few of the things that may cost you extra, such as exam fees and the subsequent storage charges that may follow. But storage charges can also occur when there are delays with the release of the bill of lading, or if a government agency wants to further review your shipment, even after customs releases it. Storage is generally priced by volume, and usually gets more expensive the longer the freight sits. All the more reason for you to have all of your ducks in a row and avoid this hit to your revenue. Another form of storage that applies only to ocean freight is known as per diem. When you ship a full container, you're renting that container from the steamship line. Once the freight gets to the U.S. and the container leaves the port for delivery, the steamship line will want the empty box returned pronto. If the container is dropped at Amazon's facility and Amazon takes their time to unload it, the steamship line will charge you a per diem fee on the container, as well as the chassis that it sits on. Amazon will not be responsible for these charges. We recommend that you transload the goods out of the ocean container and palletize the freight before delivery so that the container goes straight back to the depot. Per diem can cost hundreds of dollars a day, so it really can add up. It's not just a cost that you'd necessarily factor into your bottom line, unlike the cost of transloading and palletizing, which would be quoted before the shipment even started. So while we're on the topic of delivery-related charges, we'll want to shed some light for you on the trucking market. As I mentioned earlier, when you're getting a freight quote from us, we'll include the delivery rates, but by the time the cargo actually reaches the U.S., the rate may no longer be valid. In most cases, the cost remains the same, but recently the trucking market has become more volatile. You may recall the labor strike that happened on the West Coast last year, and that certainly had an effect on domestic trucking as well. Thanks to some poor infrastructure planning, the U.S. ports just cannot handle the volume of cargo entering the U.S., and the backlog can be catastrophic at times, just as it was last year. The woes of the truck drivers made national news last summer, and you might remember hearing stories about how the congestion in the piers was causing drivers to lose money. Drivers get paid by turns, and when there's congestion, they simply cannot make many turns per day as they're stuck in long lines at the pier. The only way these drivers can continue to earn a fair wage given the circumstance, is to charge for wait time, much like a taxi driver charges you when you're stuck in traffic. In general, drivers will allow you 1 to 2 hours at port pickup and at Amazon's warehouse before they'll charge an hourly rate for their time. This charge is commonly known as detention. It's generally around $75 an hour, but it does vary by carrier. There's two types of unloading procedures that the carriers provide. One is a live unload, where the driver will stay with the cargo until Amazon finishes unloading, and this is where detention is most likely to come into play. The other option is a drop delivery, where the driver will drop the load off and return at another time to pick up the empty container or trailer. This option involves 2 trips, so it's going to cost more initially, but it does minimize the likelihood of unplanned detention charges. When you're setting up your shipment in Seller Central, you're going to notice that Amazon provides you 3 options for delivery type. There's small parcel, less than truckload, and full truckload. Small parcel is only to be used if you're using a company like DHL or UPS to send loose boxes. Amazon does provide preferred carriers for less than truckload and full truckload as well, and you're free to use those for delivery. However, these arrangements would be your responsibility, and if you're not familiar with the process, it may be a bit of a headache for you. Shapiro can handle the delivery for you and let you handle the rest of your business. Each year, Amazon publishes a calendar of deadlines for the holiday season. It's generally about 3 weeks prior to the actual holiday, and as you can imagine, there's a mad rush to get the freight into their warehouses at this time. We cannot stress enough that you need to allow yourself ample time to get your freight in for these peaks. Wait times for appointments can be as long as 2 weeks. We do recommend that if you're worried about running out of stock, you supplement your freight shipments with small parcel deliveries with a courier service. After the holidays, another peak time for shipping will be the end of January, prior to the Chinese New Year holiday, which we are currently approaching. If you're going to be sourcing in China, you need to be aware of this week-long holiday where there will be no aircraft or vessels departing China. You will most likely not be able to communicate with your supplier at this time either. The few weeks leading up to this holiday create a high demand for cargo space, which drives the prices up and allows the carriers to have all control over what sails and what gets left behind. The big players like Apple, Samsung, Walmart, they usually buy up all of this space, and therefore they have an advantage over everybody else. There's always the risk that the carriers will roll your booking to the next sailing to make space for these big guys. The moral of the story here is proactivity.